I was asked the question, how can I stop caring what other people think? Well, first of all, you can't stop yourself from behaving according to your level of consciousness. You know, our level of consciousness absolutely dictates our behavior, and the state of consciousness of others absolutely dictates their behavior. And so, what we can do is practice Vedic meditation twice every day. You see, when we close our eyes and we take a dive inside and we experience that vast unboundedness, that deep inner self, the capital S self, imprints itself delicately but very definitely into our awareness. It gives us a ground state of what we are and who we are. That ground state of being, capital B, being. Being is the unified field of consciousness. Having identified with that during a session of 20 minutes of Vedic meditation in the morning, and then as the day progresses, it wears off, so reinstate it with another 20 minutes of Vedic meditation, late afternoon, early evening. We keep on imprinting that state of being. Then the me inside here is no longer the little me. That little me, lowercase m, I, lowercase I, am overwhelmed by someone else's opinion, someone else's state of consciousness. Easily overwhelmed. Why? Because you've made yourself small. But when we practice Vedic meditation twice a day, we start to incorporate that deep level of being, that unboundedness, into our sense of who we are and what we are. And this allows us to take a more gracious state, a more gracious point of view about all others and their experiences. It gives us the capacity, compassionately, to understand that someone's only speaking their state of consciousness. This is how we arrive at that beautiful conclusion that all reports are simply reports on the state of consciousness of the reporter. No one can really report on anything except their own consciousness state. If their consciousness state, when they report on it, uplifts us, then we take it into account. If their consciousness state does not uplift us, or doesn't seem to be consistent with the worldview we formed from our consciousness state, we can take it into account, but ultimately it's a report on the state of consciousness that they're in. If you really know who you are and what you are, then anything that anyone says about you, you realize this is a statement they're making about their own consciousness state, not about you. But to have that not just as an intellectual construct, which could be easily knocked about by, the overwhelming, suggestible state of mind we might get into when someone says, I think you're ... whatever it is that, is something lower than what you know yourself to be. Then, in order not to be suggestible, in order not to be gullible, we have to be grounded in that inner state of being. I remember a story once that I told a grandmother I saw sitting on a park bench in a big city. And she had with her a little girl who was probably about 2.5 years old. It seemed to be her granddaughter to me. And, she was sitting with her bag, the grandmother, and the little girl said, "What do you have in your bag?" And she said, "I have hard-boiled lollies." That's a British way of saying candy for Americans, hard candies. And there, "I want one of those candies now," says the little girl. The grandmother said, "We're going to go have our lunch after we catch the bus, and after lunch we'll look into my bag and see what's in there." And the little girl looks at her grandmother and decides to try a tactic. "I hate you, Grandma." To which the grandmother says, "No, come over here and sit with me. Sit on my lap and tell me all about this hate. I'm just going to pat your head a little bit and, rub your cheek, and let's hear all about the hate." So like that old grandmother, can she really be convinced that the 2-year-old hates her? This is something the 2-year-old learned how to say from television or something. It has no convincing effect on the grandmother at all. She has decades of knowledge about who she is and what she is, and the last thing she is hateable. And it was remarkable for me to watch that little girl being placated by the ease, the compassion, the groundedness of the grandmother. We need to take a lesson from that grandmother. Someone reports on their state of consciousness, and we decide that we have something to defend. It means that we've accepted their state of consciousness and transplanted it into our mind and into our heart. Why would we do that? But to have this kind of ease of understanding, to have this way of thinking that I'm describing, we can't just decide to be like that. We can be encouraged and guided by such stories of the grandmother and all that, but we really do have to be grounded in being. And then, sometimes you hear some noise outside, it's like a truck going by, and you can have a neutral attitude to the truck noise. Sometimes somebody's reporting on their state of consciousness. If it doesn't have any relevance for what you know to be so, it's like, you heard a truck go by, some sound. It's nothing that you have to get defensive about. Like that, to develop that state of consciousness, regular twice a day Vedic meditation.